Starting conversations on reducing risks in crypto trading, MAS launches a playbook aimed at protecting retail consumers.
And for more on this, we're joined by Mr. Zennon Kapron, founder and director of Kapronasia. Mr. Kapron, thanks very much for joining us. So just to recap, we're talking about a number of measures that are on the table. One of them, I believe, is a proposal for crypto service providers to set up checks for retail customers, sort of to gauge their financial knowledge. I believe there's one on not being able to use credit as well to purchase cryptocurrency. How far will these measures go, you think, in protecting customers?
I think it's pretty innovative. Around the world, we've never seen regulations like this even considered, much less enacted. The idea of kind of a crypto driver's license or some kind of way for retail investors to prove that they understand what they're getting into and the risks is very forward-thinking and quite an interesting approach. Similarly, with credit cards, really nobody should have been able to purchase crypto with credit cards. You're essentially layering one layer of risk on top of another. So that's quite sensible. But I think both of these measures combined certainly will help to at least educate people about what they're getting into. Whether it actually keeps people from investing in cryptocurrencies remains to be seen.
Mr. Kapron, the proposed measures perhaps they go a little bit towards this idea that maybe there might be some investors who don't know what they're doing, who don't know that there are risks inherent and might dissuade customers perhaps from actually getting involved in the first place. Do you think that these more stringent moves are necessary to protect those specific category of consumers?
Look, in any market where crypto is a big activity, the government and the regulators need to do things to ensure and protect the customers and the consumers as much as they can. And I think in the case of what the MAS is looking at around this, it's a good step towards doing that. Of course, if somebody wants to get involved in crypto, and claims that they understand the risks, much like many other investments that are a little bit more risky, like FX or futures or options, it's really down to them. What the MAS can do is say, look, we put the safeguards in place. We tried to ensure that people understood what they were getting into. And then to a certain extent, it's at the risk of the investor to make that final decision and jump into trading crypto or getting involved in the space.
And that's a position that I think most investors would agree with, right? But at the end of the day, would you say that MAS is sort of saying, education is out the window? Right now, I have to put in place a series of measures so that, in spite of my repeated warnings, people who should be, protected from the volatility of the market will be protected?
Well, I kind of think that education is a part of what the MAS is putting on the table. I mean, they need to act quickly because there's been, a few high-profile blow-ups here in Singapore over the past year where people have lost a significant chunk of money in certain cases. So, putting the considerations and the recommendations in place and out for comment is obviously a first step. The way I read about the retail protections is that the MAS wants to see that people understand what they're getting into. So we could conceivably see one of the ideas that I've heard from people is the idea of a crypto driver's license. I mean, here in Singapore, you obviously can't drive a car until you have a license, and the licensing process is designed to ensure that you understand what you're getting into, that you can obey the rules, and you understand the risks of driving a car in the country. And so similarly, a crypto driver's license would effectively accomplish the same thing, or hopefully accomplish the same thing. Now, in driving, there's always going to be bad drivers, and in crypto, there's always people that are going to lose money. So there is, the government, I think, is doing what they can. And this is really the first time that we've seen this anywhere around the world. Typically, governments will either ban exchanges or stop banks from connecting into exchanges. But this is the first time that we've kind of seen the onus put on the investor to show that they understand what they're getting into in the first place.
Mr. Kapron, a big part of the motivation behind all of this is to develop this innovative ecosystem as far as digital assets are concerned here in Singapore. So how else can stakeholders work together to ensure that?
Well, I think these are good first steps. A lot of these are very sensible regulations. I mean, we talked about credit cards, buying credit cards. One of the other proposed regulations is around segregation of accounts. Segregation of accounts is something that really should have been there in the first place. And that's something that we're very used to in the capital market space, in the traditional finance space. So it's a very sensible regulation to have in place here. So I think it's all moving in the right direction. This may not be the end of the regulations. This may just be the start in certain cases, but at least it puts a baseline there. And it truly would be at least region leading or potentially even globally leading in terms of how to put guardrails in place to protect that customer base of the kind of mass retail. Crypto has always been open to accredited investors, and there are many family offices and high net worth individuals here in Singapore that have crypto as part of their portfolio. In theory, they understand the risks a little bit better than the average retail investor, and so that's why they would probably still have access. But for the smaller investors that might have more as a percentage of their savings to lose by investing in crypto, we definitely need to have protections in place.
All right, Mr. Kapron, thanks very much for your thoughts. We've been speaking there with Mr. Zennon Kapron, founder and director of Kapronasia.